let's talk about Alma Thomas. Let's talk about Brittany Reid. Let's talk about how MAG is the window to the arts. I'm Alex Weiser from Floating Home Films, and I'm delighted to be here and host this conversation with Brittany Reid. Okay, so Brittany, we just walked through the exhibit, albeit a little more brief because there's a tour coming. This is a museum. Things are happening.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if you could give me some of your first impressions of seeing Alma's work in this space.
I am delighted to see some of her earlier work, some of her more abstract work, like really abstract work. I didn't realize she painted with oils earlier in her career. And I'm really excited to see some of her work where she was really excited by the U.S. space travel, the Apollo missions. I thought that was incredibly cool. Seeing her impressions of what other planets might look like, of what eclipses look like, seeing those like oranges, reds, yellows, and just seeing quotes of hers and how she was excited by these things, how she was excited by the future. We know that she was born in the late 1800s, and space travel, obviously was more novel to someone born during that time. And you can tell she was really enthusiastic about it, and it inspired a sort of optimism in her that I think has been lost now. But you can definitely see it genuinely appeared in her work. Like, she had this whole vision of what she thought it might look like up there. And I just think that's magic, right? If you can manifest or kind of conjure up an image of what you think it might look like out there, that's actual magic.
I feel that. Yeah, it's hard now to imagine a time when space travel was novel. Like you said, when we were walking around,
right.
that we kind of take for granted that this is all possible. So it's amazing to think about someone born in the 1800s, living in the 1960s and 70s, and looking at this and saying, gosh, what do planets look like? What would it look like to look down on the Earth from up there? And then also to interpret it. So like the eclipse, which is behind you, we had an eclipse in Rochester. Unfortunately, it was very cloudy.
Yes.
But I imagine the eclipse didn't look that vibrant to her.
Right.
There's an abstraction and interpretation. So when you see something like that, what does that make you think about your own work and the way that you either abstract things or interpret the natural world around you?
Honestly, when I saw that piece, it immediately took me back to the eclipse in April last year, and how we as humans all experience things that just doesn't matter who we are just, for the most part, completely impressed with these celestial events. I mean, you could be anybody during any time and you will be floored. And I know this might sound kind of hokey, but I do believe there is like a spiritual undertowing kind of brewing within all of us, right? Where we are connected by these events. We might have different value systems or different beliefs, but at the end of the day, an eclipse is really cool.
Yeah. It's special that we're all doing the same thing at the same time.
At the same time, yeah. And it repeats itself over and over. And, you go back in history, and actually when our eclipse happened, I looked at previous Rochester eclipses, and I wanted to find out what other people's impressions were. And I just think that's really neat that it inspires things like art or music or other things like that. And that's immediately what it made me think of.
Yeah.
Is my personal experience.
So I'm curious, when you first heard about Alma Thomas, first dug into her work, how did you get to know her? And then how did she inspire you or maybe change the way you think about your own practice?
When I first learned about Alma Thomas, the most remarkable part of her life was not necessarily the aesthetic of her work. It was the trajectory of her career, because I knew that she was a career teacher, and then she pivoted into art and then became successful at a much older age than one would expect. And to me, that is really impressive. Especially as, she's a Black woman and she still found success at a later age. To me, that's very, very inspirational. To me, that says You can do whatever you want at whatever point you need to in your life. She really didn't follow any rules. She finished her teaching career and then decided, I mean, she was always a lifelong painter, but, you know, in a quote unquote professional sense, she pivoted much later in life and found success. And for me, I'm constantly changing what I want to do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I would love to see other artists do the same thing. I think they definitely get stuck in this pattern of, well, I've been doing this for a long time, so I have to stick with it. But I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, this is what I'm known for. Like,
Right.
What will people think of my work and me if I change?
Right, like enough of that. If you want to change, change. If you want to learn something new, learn something new. If you want to kind of shelve what you've been doing for 10, 15 years, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more artistic than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful.
One thing I love about Alma's story is devotion. You know, like her being devoted to art education and to students.
Yeah.
And then all the while being devoted to art, but then, like you're saying, making that transition to be like, I'm doing this professionally, getting recognition. And then I think of like what it must be like for one of her old students to see their teacher succeed and be elevated to this level, and to be a Black woman celebrated in that time. Like, it must have been an amazing feeling.
I think for all of the students whom she touched, it probably felt deeply personal, right? My mother was a teacher with Rochester City Schools for 33 years. And I think she could identify any of her students as adults, and they know her right back. Like, it's a very reciprocal relationship that forms and a really deep bond. And I think when you see someone who pours that much attention and love into you succeed, you feel like you in a way succeed with them, right? Because like I said, it's a very reciprocal relationship.
So you mentioned your mother. When we talked before, you said that your mother would bring you to the mag. So tell me why you think she did that, and then also tell me a little bit about her. What kind of person is your mom?
So, well, she's an educator, for one, with the Rochester City School District since the mid-'80s. So I think that should tell you a lot right there. But she really valued art exposure for me. And so we would come here quite frequently when I was younger. And I think part of it was she enjoyed coming here, right? She enjoyed getting out of the house. She enjoyed something to do. And then part of it was she realized how important it is to expose young children to art, right? Exposing children to art and engaging them in art, like in their own creative processes, those are two different things. Both are very important. The more you expose children to art, the more likely, in my opinion, they will be engaging in their own creative processes. But I would be lying if I said that coming here all those times as a child did not deeply alter my brain chemistry in some way, right? You know, I still have my favorite pieces that are here that I think about all the time, that to this day inspire new processes as I move forward in my creative practice. That's pretty profound. And I have my mother to thank for that. And so I have a daughter now. She's 9. And we continue on to do the same thing. And she's, you know, taken her own interest in the arts, and she's very naturally good at it. But I think part of that reason is because I've fostered that, because it's been passed down to me. Mm-hmm. And I would I mean, we can go on and on about how that's not necessarily accessible to everybody, but it should be. Mm-hmm. It should absolutely be. It is so important. It is just as important as reading, writing, math, everything else.
Obviously, you've been coming to the mag for a while, but when did you start like working through your life in a creative way and interpreting and sharing?
I started taking a definite interest in the arts probably as a child. Again, thanks to my mother, would enroll me in classes. Whether it be like arts and crafts or something like that. But she would always ask me, like, is this something you want to do? I mean, yeah, definitely. I want to build stuff. I want to create stuff. And then into high school. But then sharing is like something that's completely different, right? Because now as a society, we've evolved into sharing meaning something else. So I had my first small exhibit in undergraduate school for photography. But this was really before the dawn of social media. So it wasn't like I was sharing anything with anyone on a broader scale. That wasn't until I started sharing my collages in 2020. And that was a very big decision because I was pretty resistant to it, because I feel like art is a very personal thing, kind of like, your journal that you write in every day, and should it be shared with the world? And I did that for the first year, and I didn't even show my face, and I didn't really reveal my identity because I was really so protective of it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as soon as I did reveal my identity, it kind of spiraled to the point where I got so much attention, it was difficult to navigate. So,
good problem to have, but still a problem.
Correct. It gave me a platform and it allowed me to do great things, but at the same time, it was difficult to navigate. And then, it allowed me to talk to some of the most incredible people, have fantastic connections with other artists, learn some of their skills, network. But it is exhausting. And it opens you up for criticisms that you don't necessarily want, that aren't valid. I'm open to criticism, but there are trolls. So, it's a balance. I always tell my clients, it's a balance that you must have, and it is a space you must protect.
We met a couple of years ago, almost right here.
Yeah, in the Docent Gallery. Yeah.
In the Docent Gallery for the Rochester Finger Lakes Biennial, and your work was featured.
It was.
So what did that feel like from, 2020, you start sharing your collages, to you're a part of this, wonderful institution's big exhibition? How did that feel? And then what has changed in your career from being featured?
It felt like it was coming full circle for me, right? As someone who's come here since a young child, has admired many pieces in here, supported the gallery for a very long time, worked very hard in their own career to get to a place where I feel like, okay, I think these pieces are good enough that I could submit to this. And then to get accepted was a huge honor, especially since the piece featured a Black subject. That was very important to me. So I felt great. I was very pleased. At the same time, again, like we'll talk about, it was a lot of attention. I'm a private person, generally speaking. I'm very proud of everything I do, but at the same time, in terms of what changed, I was named one of Rochester's top 10 people that year in City Magazine. Again, more time in the media and more interviewing, which is fine. Like, I think that's, again, I love having a platform for the things that are important for me. But I think a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into having the spotlight on you.
That might detract a bit from the actual creative work.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, at the end of the day, just want to work on my art sometimes. And I do feel a little guilty for saying that, right? But I shouldn't. This is how it started for me. I wanted to just create art that, sometimes has a message for causes that are very important to me. And it got to the point where I was doing like a lot of interviewing, a lot of social media, and I was like, how do I even have time to create art anymore? So I actually stepped away from doing a lot of that for like all of 2024, and stopped doing collage because it got to a point where I felt like it wasn't for me anymore. And that felt really bad. And I stepped away from it right before it felt like I started to resent the medium completely. So it was definitely a good decision and a good time that I decided to do it. And I went back to something that I was doing many, many, many years ago, which was painting. And I was like, I really want to refine my skills here. I want to find my own style. And I just kind of want to do something where I'm not tense and, you know, my jaw isn't clenched. So I went back to painting, and I've been doing that for, you know, almost 2 years now. And I really enjoy it. And I've enjoyed learning about abstract expressionism and post-war abstract and all these artists I didn't know about. It's like a whole new world has opened up. And that's what I like to do. Like, I like to learn more about things I didn't know about before. I want to, and you know, I will probably at some point, knowing me, get tired of painting and go into ceramics or something. I don't know. But that is the nature of my beast, is that I won't stay here for too long. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do what you want.
Yeah, everybody can.
Yeah. I find that I have sort of seasons of creativity where obviously I work in the medium of video most often for clients, and sometimes I will need to just sort of like abstract and mess around with footage, or, you know, find footage that I need to play with, and then I'll get bored of that.
Yeah.
And then I'll have like a winter where things are kind of slow and I need to write.
Yeah.
And these stories just come out of me, and I'll wake up and just like in the middle of the night and I got to get it out. I could not write a story right now. I'm not in that mindset, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's okay. It's okay to put things down and pick them up. But we're not always taught that. We're kind of taught to focus on a thing, get really good at that, and just like be a master.
I could go on and on about this thing that artists do now, because late stage capitalism has really hammered into their heads that they need to brand themselves and how harmful that is. There's such a huge difference between being an artist and a content creator. Mm-hmm. And